Hopefully everyone's having a chance to get settled here. We're excited for this call and for this topic and for our guest presenters from iBme. Hopefully you got my emails describing what we're going to be going into today. I'm going to let Justine do the introductions maybe, but I wanted to start by welcoming you to the call, and I wanted to also give just a couple short announcements for things coming up. You probably saw that our next community call is going to be the second week of April with Abdul Rehman Malik, who's going to be talking about storytellers as catalysts for transformation. Storytelling has been a topic that's come up a lot in this group. How do we tell the story of retreat centers? How do we share with each other the stories of what we're learning, and how does that strengthen our network and strengthen our work? So I'm excited for that call. I also am excited about another collaboration hub that is coming together out of our last call with Robert Mulhall. We talked about organizational transformation. He had a whole presentation based on some of the work that he's been doing at Kripalu, and he's agreed to lead a collaboration hub on that topic for retreat center leaders who are interested in kind of clearing the path for organizational transformation at their centers. Looks like we're going to be doing it the month of June, so 4 consecutive Wednesdays. So I'll have more information about that soon, but I wanted to alert you to that as we just had that conversation recently, and it looks like something's coming out of it that will be a little more in-depth and ongoing for a small cohort. So I'm excited about that. Justine, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thanks, Ben. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see all of you as you're wrapping up your lunches. Don't actually have much of an introduction because I think this 80 minutes or so will speak to the content and the core of iBme. I'm just grateful that so many of the team has showed up to collaboratively present. This has been a long time coming, and it's been really intentional. So I look forward to that and role modeling this space. And there's a lot of content and sharing and learning. So I'm just going to pass it on, and please populate the chat with questions if you have them, and we'll just get right into it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ben and Justine, and hello to everyone. Bear with me for 1 second as I do the inaugural screen sharing, making sure that's everything's what we need to be. And it's going to take one more click and we'll be there. Okay. How does that look for you all? Thumbs up? You can see the PowerPoint? Wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much. Here we go. Okay, good morning and good afternoon, everyone.
My video should be going, but for some reason.
I'm honored to be here today in this seat and presenting to you and with our team and be able to offer something back to this community because I've benefited a lot being in the participant seat for the several past community calls. So my name is David Macek. I'm on the collaborative leadership team at Inward Bound Mindfulness Education, also known as iBme. And we're here today to continue our JEDI discussions as a group. And what we'd like to share is kind of a case study on how this has taken shape at iBme through our equity and interdependence values and offerings and our collaborative leadership system. So just to start off, a quick introduction to iBme. iBme, we're a nonprofit. We offer in-depth and highly relational mindfulness programs for youth and the adults that support them. And our vision is to support future generations of heart-centered, diverse leaders who are prepared to respond to the challenges of their time with focus, resiliency, compassion for themselves, their communities, and the global environment. So we're one of the few orgs that are part of this collaborative whose home is not at a physical retreat center. We're actually a virtual team across the country. But however, in a non-pandemic year, we'd be partnering with and contracting with 15 to 20 retreat centers throughout the country. Many of those are members of the RCC too, so to host our week-long residential retreats. So we're really connected to this work and really committed to the health of this collaborative. And I just wanted to start off by introducing the folks that are representing our collaborative leadership team today. You have myself and my pre-pandemic haircut there. And then Tonya Jones, who we'll hear from in just a second with an opening practice. She leads program strategy and equity at iBme. Sarah Wrean, who will be taking us through collaborative leadership, is also a lead for program management at iBme. And then Ariel Pierre, who will not be presenting today, but has contributed a lot to the design of this and is also a leader on our Equity and Interdependence Committee. So from there, I just want to hand it off to Tonya to help ground us in a little brief opening practice.
Thank you, David. So I invite everyone to find a relaxed and comfortable position wherever you are, whether you're seated on a chair, or even if you want to move to the floor or a cushion. Just settling into a posture that feels alert but relaxed. Or back upright as much as possible, but not too tight. Just imagining a stable spine and the muscles, the tissue around the spine, just gently releasing. Hands resting wherever they feel comfortable. And at this time, if it feels comfortable or feasible wherever you are, there's an invitation to close your eyes. Or if not, just gently gazing downward, a soft focus, just allowing the eyes to kind of glaze over. And I invite you to take a few deep breaths at your own pace. And just allowing yourself a few moments to ground in a space where you are, to release whatever was happening before this moment, what might be coming up after, and just seeing if you could settle into your body in this present moment. And gently allowing the breath to transition into your normal breathing pattern, whatever that is for you. Normal is subjective. No need to force or manipulate the breath in any way. And in this stillness, you may notice the shape of your body, the weight, the touch, the feeling of the body making contact with the chair or floor or wherever you are. Noticing how the body holds and supports us in different ways. And for some, there may be ways in which that's not true. Just acknowledging that as well. And just seeing if you can notice and relax any areas of tightness or tension No need to force or push anything, even if it's just 1% more, just whatever's available to you in the moment. And tuning into the breath and feeling the natural flow of the inhale and the exhale. And noticing where you may feel the breath in your body. So for some, that may be strongest in the abdomen, that belly area. Or for others, it may be in the chest or throat. The sensation of breathing in and out of the nostrils. So just seeing if you can feel the sensations of the breath. Just one breath at a time. And if you find that the mind is wandering, once you notice, just gently redirecting your attention back to your breathing. And so we'll just stay with this for a few moments longer in silence. I invite you to return back to the space whenever you're comfortable, just easing back in and seeing if you can still maintain some of that groundedness and that present moment awareness we just tapped into. Thank you.
Thanks, Tonya. This is where I forget everything I was going to say because I was so relaxed from the meditation. No. Great. Yeah, that's really helpful to start us off. Yeah, so I just want to take a few more moments to share kind of a roadmap for the day, our agenda. I'm going to speak another minute or two just about the framing, and then we'll get into an opening dyad so that we can all connect with each other. From there, we're going to go into two main sections. So we'll focus on equity and interdependence, our work at iBme, which will be part presentation and a breakout conversation. And then we'll do the same for collaborative leadership as well. And then we'll close with some final questions and be off from there. So just to frame a little bit of what we're presenting today, anytime we're talking about systems, models, best practices, I always really like to bring up this quote. And it's been represented in many ways by many people. This one's attributed to George E.P. Box, who was a mathematician, I believe in the mid 20th century, but he says all models are wrong, some are useful. And You know, we're coming into this knowing that the best place we can speak from is our own experience as an organization. And we also recognize that every organization has different histories, cultures, and needs. So we're not here to advocate that our approach should be replicated. But what we hope for is that we can provide some tangible practices and principles that you can bring back to your organization to explore further and see how you can personalize it. And maybe, who knows, you know, perhaps there's a subgroup of orgs, particularly around some of the collaborative leadership work that I've heard has been emerging within RCC, that maybe we can dive deeper together as a subgroup in a peer learning community or something. So just kind of holding all that as we move forward into this. So yeah, so we'll kick it off with just a quick opening dyad to get each of us talking. And just keeping it very broad as far as, you know, our title for today is Rooted in Equity and Interdependence, Governed by Collaborative Leadership, and posing the question of what is it about this title that brought you here today? What's alive for you individually and personally, and also for your organization? So we'll be breaking apart for 5 minutes. So that'll give 2.5 minutes per person to share, and then we'll come back together. I believe, Ben, you'll.
Hey.
How was that breakout room with no one in it?
It was great. I came back from a puppy waking up and needed to go out. You know, I rescue, so I have a new foster right now.
Okay, got it. Yes.
Yep. Just one mastiff after another.
Welcome back, everyone. Maybe everyone.
Back. Did we make it? Yeah. Okay. Uh-oh, what happened there? There we go. Yeah, any quick, 1 or 2 quick shares, just what came up? Anybody wanna speak? We'll do the traditional like 10-second silence before someone actually shares something, or we could break through that habit and someone could like unmute right away. Any quick share? We're doing the 10-second silence. Okay, it's all good. Just one person. It'd be great to hear someone.
Maybe I can jump there. I have the pleasure of sharing the room with Ariel, and we were talking a little bit about responding to the prompt, what brought us here, and one of the things that we were looking at was the creating the bridge for collaboration to take place more and more, and at the same time recognizing that sometimes the bar is very high, but we want to be able to contribute to whatever is going on to advance the conversation or the process.
Cool. Thank you, Francisco. Appreciate that. Cool. Okay, well, from here, I'm going to hand it off to Tonya, who's going to start to lead our section on equity and interdependence. Tonya, take it away, and I'm going to reshare my screen.
Great, thanks, David. So I just want to I guess begin by really just touching on like how we approach the work. And when we look at mindfulness and approaching our equity and interdependence work, it's coming out of the belief that like that equity and justice are things that are really like fundamental and vital components of mindfulness practice. That it's a part of it, versus something to look at as an outside kind of activity or way of practicing. That is something that is inherently integrated into our practice. So, with that kind of approach and belief, it requires more than just recognizing and kind of accepting like the full reality of a moment, which is something that is a part of our practice. Kind of really, those four foundations of mindfulness. So it is a part of a practice, but it's not where it ends. The idea of it also of accepting the full reality of a moment and whatever arises is a part of the practice, but not necessarily where it ends. And something I wanted, with that word kind of accepting is just something I want to focus on for just a moment, because what I have found, like in my own practice and some of the communities that I've been with over the years, in some spaces there's an idea of accepting what is kind of compliance, or accepting what is means kind of just being able to have a container to hold what's happening and being able to self-regulate, maybe not be reactive in a way that would feel harmful. But the accepting of what's happening is really more so of like being with that moment and being clear and knowing what's happening, so that can help, I would say, cultivate more compassion and wisdom for the next steps after. But if you can't recognize and kind of accept what is happening first, then how do you act? So I just wanted to differentiate between like how I'm using the word accepting here. So what mindfulness really asks us is to bring a greater sense of awareness of what's truly present in our minds, in our hearts, and to reflect on how those things may shape how we show up in the world and how we relate to others, the biases that we may have, and how those things may influence our actions, both in ways that may be harmful or may also be helpful. So, what I feel like in our practice, it requires us to be active, and that once we know what's there and what's really present and real for us, then we have that opportunity to investigate and to question, and ultimately like lean into our acquired wisdom, so that there is more discernment around our speech and our behavior and our actions, and moving forward in a way that is most skillful and well aligned with the values of equity and interdependence, and also clearly being able to more clearly notice when they are not. So, this work at iBme has been an ongoing effort that was started several years ago. So there's a lot there, like just a lot of meaty like learning and content, and a number of those things can be found on our website, where you can find here. David has a link up for our equity and interdependence. There's a 10-year report. Our annual report is also there. A number of other things to read, resources, initiatives, some offerings, and all of those things. So I definitely encourage you to visit our Equity and Interdependent page when you have more time to do so, outside of our meeting here today. But so in our work, like both collectively and individually, we've learned a lot about what it means to be an organization that was primarily staffed and led by persons from the dominant culture. And there are a number of, I would say, like describers, but mostly what we're speaking to is like white, cisgender, mostly, middle income, able-bodied, and really like the harmful impact that not having diverse voices in leadership and decision-making processes could have on an organization and the community that it serves. And even just beyond harm, there's also just for the organization what I feel is a missed opportunity for more richness, really, in the organizations and potentially in the kind of programming that's being offered and the way that communities are being built as a larger organization, but also those sub-communities. So even if we're kind of taking out the equity and justice piece, like there's just a loss, I think, as a community. When you kind of fall into this place where you just kind of have like a plethora of homogenous voices and perspectives. And I, just speaking for myself in my own personal life, there's a lot of diversity in my personal life, just in personal relationships or interests and things I do. And my life is definitely richer for it. There are a lot of things I wouldn't have experienced, people I wouldn't have known, things that, people I wouldn't have met, all kinds of things I wouldn't have done if I kind of lived in a world that really only was informed by a specific like dominant voice. So I like to just focus on that too. So, there's a lot that's been done. Like I said, it's been years working on this and different stages and, different levels of an investment. Sarah will share more about the collaborative leadership model later, but I wanted to mention it now because I really feel like it ties in and is really like an important piece of like this overall vision around equity and interdependence. So just for some of the work and initiatives we've been working on or have launched over the past year to 18 months or so, one of the things that started happening last fall are pulling together focus groups and also having individual key informant interviews. And the first focus group started with staff, and for obvious reasons. There's a knowledge of the past and present, that historical knowledge. The team within the community is a group that's spending the most time together. It's very important to know what staff experience has been, but also equally important to hear from staff what they envision and hope for, like in this work, and what they feel it will take to get there. And that is a collaborative, inclusive discussion where everyone is able to give input, everyone is able to share that voice, because that may look different. The answers to those, they will, in most cases, look different to a lot of different people. And I would totally acknowledge here that, I think that being a mindfulness organization or being in a mindfulness community, does have its advantages in approaching this work. It's, it's not easy for a lot of people, regardless of where you are, but I do feel that just there is a baseline of ways of communicating respectfully and of exercising the values of compassionate and authentic listening, being vulnerable and sharing, that has felt a little more present, like in this community, from my own experience and having conversations and approaching this work in some other communities. So that is helpful and just something to point out. So with the focus groups, we also included, we had youth focus groups, and those are our program and retreat participants. And we had a focus group with our Teachers Advisory Council, communities of color. We included LGBTQ. So we had really tried to cover like different ages, socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnic and cultural backgrounds. Like we really tried to include as many voices that were available and willing to participate as possible. And what was key about doing the key informant interviews, no pun intended there, is that some people are more comfortable speaking more openly, more candidly about certain feelings or experiences they may have had around these topics, or some of the themes that we addressed in. So, it was an opportunity to take a deeper dive individually, or sometimes something would come up in a focus group and we're like, hey, we'd really like to learn more and hear more from that individual that brought this up, because this is the first time like we've heard this kind of comment. So that was the benefit of that. And some of the areas that we dove into there, I'm going to give you more kind of big umbrella just for the sake of time versus more individual questions, which is like DEI vision, present commitment, questions around policies and infrastructure, training, community building, decision making, accountability and inclusion. More specifically with our youth focus groups, we also dove into topics around feeling respected and feeling included, feelings of belonging, empowerment, and also feeling that there are opportunities to be seen and heard, to be a youth leadership in the different ways that that may form, what that might look like. And some of the other things too is just about like personal experience or things that have been witnessed, like what has been your experience or perception of the DEI culture here? Like what is working? What can be improved? What kind of work have you been a part of here? Do you feel like that's been useful? Have teens on retreat ever, requested or behaved in a way that communicated a desire for more discussion around equity and interdependence? Were staff members able to meet those demands? So there were a number of things, and right now we're still in the process of compiling all of this data into a report that will be shared, and it'll be on our website at that point later this spring, but it will be shared with staff and our entire community. And when we say community, we're not just talking about our team participants or our staff or contractors or the many mentors, teachers, and so on, but also, parents, people who are working with youth in service to youth. So this will be shared publicly because it can also be a resource to other organizations or groups or communities as well. So some of the programs that we currently have that has been responsive to this kind of work is our Teens of Color retreat. We also have a weekly BIPOC meditation and discussion group. There's also a white anti-racist affinity class, which is also a discussion group. We have our LGBTQ sits, and something else that we've been using, like anytime we convene or we're having any kind of trainings, we've also been using those opportunities to collect as much information, as much data as possible from the community to help inform our decisions around this work and what we prioritize. So, for example, our community members, some of the things that they said they really like to learn more about or get training on, have more, receive more support. And number one is actually more training on facilitating and engaging in these kind of discussions. A lot of people, have shared like they want to talk about these things more, but they're just not sure how to approach it. Like what's like a good framework, or how can I, do this in a way that also feels, inclusive and culturally informed. Another thing that's was a high priority from our community is more training on inclusive teaching practices and exploring different approaches to teaching, and also like looking at how to introduce mindfulness to different communities in less than traditional ways. So we're, maybe like talking, one thing that came up recently in a conversation with a funder was the use of the word mindfulness in itself. And in this particular community, there was a lot of trauma attached to how that word was used with these particular group of young people. But that's something that, and they explained it quite well, it totally made sense. But again, that's something that you wouldn't know if you're not going out and actively engaging with the community and asking those kind of questions. So that's why it feels really important to get so many voices into the room, and especially the youth for our particular group of people that we primarily serve. And then lastly, we've also recently launched our Equity and Interdependence Community Conversation Series. So this is not a traditional or formal type of training. It's really a monthly community conversation that is more so about sharing content and knowledge and wisdom on a wide range of themes and topics. And then we explore those topics and actually get in conversation with each other and are able to do that safely in our community. So it's really an opportunity to have the kind of intentional and focused and curated conversations, specifically through the lens of equity and interdependence that, a lot of us just wouldn't normally have in our everyday lives. So with the hopes for some of these sessions is, really to just learn more about some of the themes or topics that are shared, cultivating a greater understanding, appreciation of different peoples and cultures, different perspectives, definitely learning from and amplifying our youth voices, and increasing and deepening community engagement around shared values and visions. There's also opportunities from learning from other people's experience, their successes, or even things that didn't go so well, new tools, best practices. And I could kind of go on and on about like the different potential outcomes of the conversations. So last month, just to give you kind of an idea of what this looks like. Last month we had a theme, remembering, and with remembering, we were really exploring the theme of remembering through the lens of racial identity. So remembering when and how we became aware of our own racial identity in the world, and how that awareness has impacted our lives, individually and collectively, and how that awareness of our own identity also impacts how we see and engage with other people. This month, we're the Equity and Interdependence Community Conversation theme is nurturing, so mentoring and caring for young people. And the way that these conversations look can be different from month to month depending on who's facilitating them. We definitely want to leave a lot of room for creativity and different approaches. So last month, one of our teens was an MC and let us sit. We had a couple of, we shared some content like videos and poems, and one of them I'll share with you shortly when we do our breakouts. But, we had time for community discussion. So, but this month, it's actually going to be a couple of guest teachers who works a lot with youth and families, and there will be a panel of our youth. So that's very different from last month, and that's intentional. The components that we like to include, regardless of what it looks like creatively, though, is just to ensure there is some kind of youth voice included, in however form and whatever form that takes place, and also making sure that there is really enough time allotted for exploration and discussion. sometimes like I feel like that could be the thing where it's like, oh, we're just talking and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh no, we only got like 2 minutes to talk about this, and that's really not adequate time. So like those are really the high priorities for us. And beyond that, we like to leave the framework loose to just be able to adapt each month. And, so some of the other topics that will be coming up, again, I already mentioned April, in May, reimagining and also looking at Asian and Pacific Islander heritage, loving, looking in June, looking at the different ways that we love and the different relationships and what all of those relationships, or at least some of them, look like. And also having a focus on LGBTQ voices. Moving like later into the year, we're going to be exploring intersectionality. Later on in the year, also looking at ableism and ability, Hispanic Heritage Month, how we build community and awaken and awareness together, honoring indigenous cultures, how mindfulness and social justice interact, and how mindfulness can engage social justice work. So those are a few of the topics and themes that we have coming up later in the year. And again, this is on our website. I do encourage you to visit the website. All of these community conversations are open to the public. You would just need to go on the website and sign up to attend, and you receive information to be able to attend in a Zoom link for that. And I guess we'll have time later on for questions. So, as I mentioned, I'm just going to kind of give you a little sample of what we did last month from our Remembering Community Conversation. And FYI, we had obviously an hour and a half for this. So we'd already had an ice-breaking activity and discussed identity, some of the things that I mentioned earlier around the theme and the lens that we were exploring that theme with. And we also, for this community conversation, kept the same people together when we went to breakout rooms, so that throughout the program, the trust and depth of conversation could grow amongst the same people, which I found that it did, and I think that most people probably would agree in attendance. So this is a poem, and it's called Hallelujah, the Saviors Are Here. It was written by Rachel Smith when she was 18 years old. It was performed at the Louder Than a Bomb festival, which it may still be, but I know at that time it was the largest teen slam poetry festival in the world. And this poem brings up a lot of issues, including racial difference between students and teachers, and also what it means for people to come in and try to save a community, particularly when that community is not their own. So the poem is just audio. It'll just be about 2.5 minutes, and David will play and share the poem with you. And then after that, we'll come back and we'll go out into breakout rooms for a little bit to talk about it, and I will share a few questions to help facilitate that discussion.
Okay, here we go.
We can save them, I still believe. Cry the saviors riding in on their steeds with tucked in shirts and rolled up sleeves. They barge in coming to rescue these niggers. With copies of freedom riders tucked tight in their hands, they come to explore our uncharted lands and rescue us urban kids. And bring us salvation, enlighten our generation, and give us black kids just a little education. Rescue us from the gangs, remove us from the streets, white out our stains to give our souls a little bleach, coming with the intention to have us fully tamed, sit down, shut up, and swallow the lies that they teach. Don't teach us about our culture, instead just how to conform. They'll break us apart, then tell us to reform, but they give us all the wrong parts, convincing us that our skin's just a little too dark and needs to be a tad bit more beige. And they set in our insecurities at a very early age, telling us, it's okay, just line up to learn. And since you're too dumb, there's some tricks you can turn. I can try to save you, but there's really no hope. because we both know you just go back to dealing dope. All that you're going through is no wonder you're tired. No need to explain. I've seen The Wire. Thinking that we're no better than prostitution and dealing crack. But it's what they believe, so they slap us 5 and give us dab as they slowly continue to drive that knife into our backs. So when they set that math right in front of us, we remember and say, ain't we too dumb for this? And get confused when they ask us for the sum of this, saying, I don't know how to put together no numberers. While they're eager to take on the role of Sandra Bullock, we are the ones blindsided by those with the false intentions and the happily closed-minded. Only see them for 2 years because we're just a stepping stone so they can get to their prep schools, where they can share their experience about their encounter with the inner city blues. All of their stories start out with, well, in the ghetto, as their colleagues prepare themselves to hear about students on educational death row. They'll clamor up and ask, did you see anyone get shot? Why, almost every time I rolled out of bed. Then they'll puff their chest out with pride and bask in their newly found street cred. It's time we rebuke these self-proclaimed saviors and put our faith in the true educators, the ones who expect master's degrees and double majors, and not the ones just trying to do the Black community a couple favors.
Thank you, David. So we're going to go into breakout rooms in a moment. And David, I know you've been watching the time too. If you just want to select an appropriate time period for that, that would be great. Thank you. And some of the questions, I'll post them in the chat, but just really quickly, some of the things you might or you can explore or something totally different. These are just invitations. Who are the saviors that Rachel is describing? So when you picture them in your head, like how do they look or act? There's a line there that says, white out our stains and give our souls a little bleach. What do you think she might mean by that? And also, how does Rachel distinguish the saviors from true educators? And do you see those distinctions where you work or any other spaces? And lastly, and you won't have time to explore all of these, so these are just all different ideas. What would the world look like if this title of this poem wasn't an ironic title about urban education? Like, what would the world look like in your mind? And I'll just post that here.
Great, thanks, Tonya. I think Ben's going to put us in triads for about 7 minutes. So we'll have about 2 minutes to share each. So definitely want to just probably choose one of those questions and whatever is your deepest quick reflection, and we'll come back together.
I've got mostly triads. I've got one pair, so there's a lucky pair in there too. We'll see you in 7 minutes.
And just really quickly, well, one, thank you for engaging and listening and engaging in this conversation. I don't know if you were thinking like, oh, I'm gonna have to talk to people about stuff today or not, but if you didn't, thanks for being a team player on that. Yeah, if we could just spend like a quick minute, because I know that Sarah has a lot to share about collaborative leadership too, and it's juicy. But if there's anyone that wants to just share any quick reflections from your group, either verbally or in the chat, definitely invited to do so. And no pressure. If you're just kind of like, no, I'm good, that's cool too.
I think one of the things this has reminded me is that just because I have good intentions and a sincere heart, that doesn't necessarily excuse me from being arrogant and assuming. So just because I'm not malicious, I don't get a pass.
Thank you for sharing that, Anne. And yeah, so again, if you have any reflections, please feel free to drop them in the chat at any time throughout our period together. And I'm just going to transition now and pass the baton to back to Sarah and David. Thank you.
Thank you, Tonya. Really appreciate all of that. Yeah, I'm going to do just a brief introduction, bring Sarah on to talk about collaborative leadership. And just in a transitional note, we are shifting gears from kind of this deep work to looking at how the commitment to what this work involves, and if you're going deep into it in terms of making the values and really inform actions and organization-wide actions. What Sarah is going to share around our collaborative leadership model that has taken root over the last several years at iBme. This model came directly out of our commitment to this equity and interdependence work, and us challenging ourselves as an organization and institution to say, we know in our history where our roots are as a historically dominant identity-led organization. What does it take to actually bring more equity into decisions that are made, leaderships that's held, voices that are in the room? And so what Sarah's going to share as our model is what has come forward and kind of formed for us. So I'll kick it to Sarah to talk about collaborative leadership.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you, Tonya, for leading that really thoughtful portion. You promised juicy from me in this collaborative leadership. I better deliver something juicy. So in our collaborative leadership model, we have this slide that David is sharing, which shares the 6 aspects of leadership that we sort of have taken on to readjust in a way that feels more collaborative to us. We did this, as David said, to further our organizational work, to achieve, as this says, greater self-management, but also truthfully to prevent burnout of our executive director and executive directors in general, and those who in a regular sort of traditional nonprofit system sit at the top and have most of the power and also most of the stress, perhaps, within the system. And we also wanted to create an environment that was operating with high trust, as opposed to most of our sort of more traditional nonprofit systems. So within our system, I'm just going to tell you a few terms that we are using. One of those terms is willingness. So we're trying to operate within a system where every person, every staff member, every community member is coming to each task or project or program they're doing with actual true willingness, not just because they have to, because their job description says they have to. Our willingness may come from a place of knowing it's part of my job and wanting the organization to function well. And so I have the willingness to, look at my budget and have the hard conversations or something, but there's an aspect of willingness. There's also an aspect of capacity. So what do we actually have the current resources to hold as each individual person, and capacity as an organization as a whole? And then also talking about skill and talent, and trying to align folks' individual skills and talents within the organization where they will fit well, offer opportunity for growth, but also be really aligned. So we use those terms when we're kind of talking about the system at large. So when iBme undertook this effort to start collaborative leadership, we did so one aspect at a time. So the first aspect that we took on as an organization was aligning our vision and values together. So having a shared understanding of our work together. both reflecting the system at large, like what is our big V vision for the world, and also what is our day-to-day vision of how we can function together as an organization and as people within that organization. So those, David's going to populate them right there, are 5 main values that are, there are sort of smaller values encompassed in those: mission-centered, collaboration, compassionate authenticity, trust, mutual support and celebration, and excellence. And then we also have unexamined values. We've found that there are a lot of ways that our patriarchal, capitalist, colonized framework really promotes achievement at all costs, efficiency at all costs, and growth at all costs. And these are areas that we're sort of trying to attend to and make sure that if we're not explicitly naming them, they're going to show up, because that's how we've all been conditioned. So really trying to attend to those and make sure that we're doing our checks and balances. So we undertook that vision and values work, and then the next step of our work together was actually feedback. So I'm going a little bit out of order, but I thought it might be helpful to offer the way we went through this process. So we determine our shared vision and values, and then we create a system of how we can communicate our needs and the impact of others' actions on us in the system, what's working and what's not working. So it's not just a quarterly review or a feedback situation when something really bad happens, but actually we're trying to embed into the system a web of feedback that we're all offering to each other. So what it looks like in practice for us is sharing like one appreciation and one opportunity for growth in our working relationship. We do this at the end of most meetings, actually, is like, let's take a pause, what worked, what didn't work. And we use the rule of thumb: the more closely you're working together, the more often you should be engaging in feedback. Even if you don't think you have anything specific to say, it's still worth it to have that feedback check-in. We also are totally aware that in a traditional hierarchy, feedback doesn't flow uphill. We're not often giving feedback to our direct supervisors. So we're trying to attend to this by embedding it in the system so that nobody's having to pay attention to it on their own. It's already built in, it's already baked into the cake. And then we're also still operating from a place of willingness with feedback. Are you willing to hear feedback from me about our work together? So that's an ongoing process. We use kind of a nonviolent communication framework for how we offer feedback, talking about our feelings, needs, the impact of others' actions on us. And that supports number 6, conflict resolution, in that we're hoping that less conflict arises within the organization because these feedback systems are really robust. So I know I'm going quick, but I'm paying attention to the time. So the next aspect that we took on was decision-making for the organization. So we have a distributed decision-making model, which means that we are opting in to be part of decisions that are made for the organization on a scale of 1 to 5, a 1 being the person who is responsible. And David's going to show you our very detailed working document, our decision-making matrix, where every single topic that we are thinking about as an organization and a staff of 6, from partnership development to the budget to our branding, all those things, we are actually asking staff to opt in. What level do you want to be involved in this decision-making process? And this is all still tethered to, we do have job descriptions, and we do have sort of a specific set of responsibilities that each of us have. So it's not like nobody can, decide to do one thing, that wouldn't serve the organization. But in general, if I feel strongly, even though I'm in programs, that I would like to have input into another realm, I can opt in to that decision-making process. So the 1 through 5 scale, yeah, I'm not going to go any deeper than that. Everybody's opting in on a 1 through 5. And I think I'll pause and say that we started this effort with just our core administrative, full-time, exempt employee staff. And as we went through this process, it became more and more clear to us that it actually wasn't sufficient to just do this within the staff and sort of stop there. It felt really weird to not have the same established collaboration with our board or with our program committee or with the folks who were working with us on the ground at retreat centers doing retreats. So we've continued to expand. So the things that I'm talking about now are actually applicable to like the whole system of the organization, which we'll get to in a minute. That's the juicy stuff, maybe. The next aspect we started to focus on was information flow, which is attending to who is sharing what information with whom and how and when. Because in this model, since there is distributed decision making, more people need to be involved and know what's going on than in a normal, traditional environment. So really mapping out who needs to be looped in to different decisions as they're being made. And this is very much a work in progress. And I would say one of the challenging things about collaborative leadership is really attending to making sure that everyone who's part of our solar system is getting the information that they need and also getting to everyone else the information that they need. We also have taken on a resource allocation in a collaborative way. So we have no executive director anymore at iBme. We dissolved that position in January 2020, and we have a shared budget, a shared budgeting process. So all 6 staff members hold a piece of the organizational budget that's relevant to their work. Tonya and Ariel hold the equity budget, for example. I hold the program expense budget, for example. And we go through a collaborative budgeting process together. So the idea is that the area of the organization which we have responsibility in, we also have power in that same place. Power or decision-making authority, I guess, would have been another way to say that. In terms of resource allocation, we also have shared salary discussions. So as a team of 6, we know each other's salaries, and we are coming to a shared understanding as a team of everyone's compensation. We've created a 6-prong process to go through to determine someone's salary. One of those characteristics being historic privilege and disadvantage, which I think is probably the most radical one that we don't often see in a salary discussion. Usually we're talking about how much were you paid before? What is the comparable amount that you would be paid in this position? How many higher level degrees do you have? Those things may come into play with how you're able to show up and do the job with your skills and talent, but those aren't directly tied to a compensation amount. Also, for our retreat staff, we have probably about between 100 and 200 contract employees who are mentors, adults mostly, who are working on our retreats as mentors and staff members. And we're having a one-on-one conversation with each of those people about the stipend amount and making sure that it is something that is doable for them. So we're trying to shift to more of a needs-based place. Those are the 6 aspects. David, could you put up the next visual just to give y'all a picture of the system? So this beautiful constellation is our collaborative leadership system. When we realized it was insufficient to only have the staff be operating in this way, we've now undertaken a major restructuring of all leadership within the organization, including our board of directors, to really bring it in line to what was actually organically true for us. Who were we going to as a staff team for support? Who was offering their time, their expertise, their talent to the organization? So these are our pods or committees. We're still playing with the naming. Staff, a teachers advisory council, a communities of color leadership team, a youth advisory council, the Equity and Interdependence Committee, a collaborative leadership committee, and the finance and legal committee. Each of these committees will be will have one representative coming together to make up our board of directors. So our board of directors is organically coming from our community and will be representing the different aspects of leadership within our community. Whew. So I could keep talking, but I actually think that this would be a great chance to pause. We're not going to have time to do another breakout, but I would just love to open it up. If you want to have your voice in the space, please feel free to unmute yourself. If you would rather put it in the chat, you know, we're curious about, based on what I've shared about the system, what are you noticing about how these different aspects of leadership are alive for you and your community right now? Or what's really challenging, or what's your aspiration? What do you want to do next? Yeah, so just kind of opening the space to hear any thoughts about that, or any reflections that you have. We welcome your sharing.
I'm new at my place of employment, Lindenwood Retreat Center, but I can tell you that the things that you just covered with us, Sarah, have great potential in any retreat center, would be my guess. I really love your checks and balances, that you are constantly aware of what are we doing at all costs, and as a checks and balance. That really appealed to me, because sometimes we just throw ourselves all in, and we're not asking those questions about what's this costing in terms of a personal emotional toll,
right,
or whatever else. And and that whole collaborative leadership was very intriguing to me.
Thank you so much, Sue.
I'll just share off of that. You know, when I think of our model for collaborative leadership, and in particular how it connects to retreat centers, because like I said in the beginning, we're not a retreat center, but we definitely function as such, with a community of, you know, faculty, and in holding retreats and in being in that intimate space, there's this deep sense of community. And for me, being in this model of collaborative leadership, it's really amazing how much it nurtures community, so that, you know, we can kind of if we're living together in the same land together, if we're in those spaces together, we are already breaking down those barriers of what a work and personal kind of relationship is. And I feel like the values and the structure of collaborative leadership helps hold all of that, holds each other in community. So
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Both sections are amazing and beautiful, and we could probably spend like 3 days delving into them. I was curious, I know the equity and interdependence feeds into the collaborative leadership. How did you come to the decision to really invest in equity and interdependence? And did you do those focus groups in-house, hire a consultant or third part? Like, how did that come to be and inform that work?
Tonya, do you want to answer that? I'm also happy to. I'll just say, since iBme's founding in 2010, there has been an equity and interdependence component to our staff training. Even when we were just doing one retreat a year, we gather the staff a full day before the teens come, and a portion of that day is spent focusing on our own identities and our identities as a staff team, and really kind of doing a little bit of processing so that we can show up for the teens when they arrive and feel like we are a community who's focused on them more so than our own identity work.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And I would just add to that, I think, over time, and also keeping in mind that there's a priority to also be responsive to the communities that we're serving, what's happening like in the greater world. There was a recognition that there was a heavier lift that was needed organizationally, and I think that led to some of the work and initiatives that were mentioned here, and also the progress report that David just put into the chat that you can read more about. And as for the focus groups, so that started, say, fall. So that's pretty recently, at least the focus groups that I was mentioning. They are internal because we wanted to hear from the people that were most impacted and affected and involved. So those were internal focus groups. As David mentioned earlier, Ariel was very involved in that process as well. And we've also been working with a consultant through the process too.
I have a question. In the collaborative leadership, and you have the listing of kind of tasks, activities by departments, and kind of where people opt in. Do you all take time kind of once a year and create kind of what that list looks like, and then everybody opts in? And when do you like revisit it, and changes and things like that happen? How does that kind of process work?
Ideally, we're doing it actually a lot more often than once a year, because, well, I think maybe David, Ariel, and Tonya might have other opinions, so I'll just speak for myself, but constantly our tasks and bandwidth are changing. So we might revisit it when I come to a staff meeting and say, I am feeling totally overwhelmed with my workload and I am not able to do A, B, and C. Then maybe we relook at the matrix and say, who has the bandwidth? And if nobody does, at least we can hold as a collective that there's a void, that something isn't being done. And it's not just on me, it's on, it's the team support that we can figure it out together. But we do use it as a living, breathing document that is changing, and as roles within the organization change or we have a new hire, that's certainly part of it too.
And can I ask, how big is your staff?
6. We are a staff of 6, yep.
Okay.
And then there's about 30 to 35 folks that are on the leadership committees, so 7 leadership committees right now. So it does extend out. I will say the one other thing I'll add is you'll hear a lot in our meetings and other things. You'll hear this phrase of who's the one, and who's the one who is chiefly responsible for it. And that's really helpful, because the times that we've gotten through a meeting and that's asked at the end, is much more problematic than when it's asked at the beginning, and we've already have claimed our spaces on numbers on a new ground that we're trying to get into. So it is a structure that helps in an ongoing way, but also with new projects and so forth.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know we're at 2:59, so I don't know how much we left for Ben and Justine as well for.
You left the perfect amount.
Notes. Okay, all right. I don't know. Should we transition from here at this point? I don't know if there's any last like burning comment. I guess we can allow that to surface.
I see Janing popped one in the chat that I think is something I would ask as well.
Oh, when we're choosing centers for our retreats, what are our considerations? Oh man. A lot of considerations. And most of the ones that are coming to my mind right now are very logistical in nature. Like, how far is the retreat center from an airport? Because we have teens flying into retreats. I would love to answer that question in like a more full way. Maybe I'll follow up with an email, because I'm generally the one doing that, and also actually have another meeting I have to hop off for. But I'm happy to share how we're kind of thinking about, you know, working with retreat centers and what those considerations are, for sure.
That will help us clarify our lenses. That's
yeah. Great. Yeah, I'd be happy to share
that. Thank you all for being here for this call and for holding on. Appreciate it. And thank you to all of our guest facilitators. That was really amazing. Appreciate the time that you put into that. I have a quick poll that I can share with you, and I'll see you soon. This is where the theme music to my TV show or radio show should begin.
Ad-lib it, Ben. Ad-lib. Thanks, everyone. If you've done the polls, we'll see you later. Thanks so much.
Thanks for being here.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
So if I never do the poll, I'm just going to sit here all day?
Perfect, Paul. It's been a while with us.
Bye.
Rude.
See you guys later. You have a good time.
See ya.
Yeah, I'm the only one still sitting here.